Have you ever discovered that your entire family history was built on a lie? Sarah Bennett was 32 years old when she found a photograph hidden in her deceased mother's jewelry box. It was a picture of a woman she'd never seen before, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, standing in front of a small house in what looked like rural Georgia. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, Ma 1995. I'm so sorry. Sarah's mother, Linda, had died of cancer 6 months earlier. She'd never mentioned having a mother. Sarah had grown up believing her mother was an orphan, raised in foster care, with no family to speak of. But this photograph, this note, suggested something entirely different. Sarah's grandmother had been alive. Maybe still was, and for some reason, her mother had kept her hidden. This is the story of a family torn apart by lies, 30 years of unnecessary separation, and the truth that changed everything. Sarah grew up in Atlanta, raised by a single mother who worked as a nurse. Her father left when she was a baby, and her mother's past was a closed door. Whenever young Sarah asked about grandparents, Linda would say, "It's just us, sweetheart. We're all the family we need." Linda was a good mother, loving, devoted, present, but there was always something sad behind her eyes. When Linda was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, she had 3 months. They spent those final months talking about everything except one thing. Linda never mentioned her own mother. After Linda died, Sarah found the photograph in an old jewelry box. The woman looked to be in her 60s, standing in front of a white house. She had Linda's warm brown eyes, the same dimple. The resemblance was unmistakable. On the back, an address, 428 Maple Road, Brookhaven, GA, less than an hour from Atlanta. She left right after graduation, Dorothy said, her voice shaky as she poured tea with trembling hands. One day she was here, planning for college, talking about her future. The next day, she was gone. She left a note saying she never wanted to see me again, that I'd ruined her life, that she was starting over somewhere I'd never find her. Why? Sarah asked. What happened? What did you do? Dorothy's face crumpled. I don't know. That's what I've spent 30 years trying to understand. One day we were finer. I thought we were fine. The next day she hated me enough to disappear forever. There must have been something, Sarah pressed. People don't cut off their parents for no reason. There was a boy, Dorothy said slowly. James. Linda was in love with him her senior year. He was a nice boy, from a good family. I liked him. But then, She paused, collecting herself. Linda came home one day and said she was pregnant. She was 18, about to start college. She was terrified. Sarah's breath caught. What did you do? I did what I thought was right, Dorothy said, and there was such pain in her voice. I told her we'd figure it out together, that I'd support whatever decision she made. James wanted to marry her. He was ready to step up. His parents were supportive too. But Linda said she wasn't ready to be a mother. She said she wanted to go to college, wanted to have a life first. She was considering adoption. And James's mother, Patricia, came to me. She begged me to convince Linda to keep the baby, to let her son marry Linda. She said they'd help financially, that Linda could still go to college. I thought I was helping. I thought I was giving my daughter good advice when I told her that giving up the baby might be something she'd regret forever. That maybe she should consider James's proposal. That maybe this was meant to be. Dorothy's hands were shaking so badly she set down her teacup. She looked at me with such betrayal in her eyes. She said I was trying to trap her, that I'd sold her out to James's family, that I cared more about their opinion than about what she needed. We had a terrible fight. She was crying. I was crying. I tried to explain that I just didn't want her to have regrets, that I was trying to help her see all her options, but she wouldn't listen. What happened then? She disappeared that night. Left a note saying she was done with me, that I'd tried to control her life, that she was starting over without me. I looked for her for months, filed a missing persons report. But she was 18, legally an adult. The police said if she wanted to leave, that was her right. I hired private investigators. They found nothing. It was like she'd vanished completely. Dorothy wiped at her tears. I never knew what happened to the baby. Never knew if she kept it or gave it up for adoption, or I tormented myself with possibilities for years. And now you're here, which means she kept you. She kept the baby, but she didn't keep me. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't forming the picture she'd expected. Did you try to force her to keep the baby? No, Dorothy said adamantly. I swear to you, I told her it was her choice. But maybe the way I said it made her feel pressured. Maybe I emphasized the wrong things. Maybe I made her feel like I judged her for considering adoption. I don't know. I've replayed that conversation 1,000 times, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Dorothy photos of Linda in her nursing scrubs. Of Linda and Sarah at Sarah's college graduation. Of Linda in her final weeks. Thin and frail, but smiling. Dorothy sobbed openly, touching the screen like she could reach through it and hold her daughter. She became a nurse, Dorothy whispered. She always wanted to help people. Did she? Was she happy? Yes, Sarah said honestly. She worked hard, but she loved her job. She loved me. We were close. She was a wonderful mother. Did she ever talk about me? Sarah hesitated, then decided Dorothy deserved the truth. No. She told me she was an orphan, that she had no family. I grew up thinking you didn't exist. The pain that crossed Dorothy's face was devastating. She erased me completely. I found a photograph after she died, Sarah said. Of you. On the back, she'd written, "I'm so sorry." What do you think she meant? Dorothy shook her head. I don't know. Maybe she regretted leaving. Maybe she wanted to reach out, but didn't know how. Maybe too much time had passed, and she was ashamed. I'd have given anything to hear from her. Anything. Even just to know she was okay. They talked for hours. Dorothy told Sarah stories about Linda's childhood, how she'd loved to read, how she'd rescued stray cats, how she'd won the school spelling bee 3 years in a row. She showed Sarah baby albums, school projects, report cards, an entire life that Linda had left behind. Why didn't you keep trying to find her? Sarah asked. I did. For years. But eventually, I had to accept that she didn't want to be found. That maybe the most loving thing I could do was respect her wishes and let her go. It nearly killed me. But I let her go. Sarah spent the rest of the day with Dorothy, absorbing stories, looking at photographs, trying to understand. When evening came, she didn't want to leave. This woman, this grandmother she'd never known existed, felt like the missing piece she had known she was looking for. Over the following weeks, Sarah returned again and again. Each visit revealed more of the picture. Dorothy wasn't a villain. She wasn't a controlling mother who tried to ruin Linda's life. She was a woman who made one mistake giving advice her daughter didn't want to hear at a vulnerable moment had paid for it with 30 years of separation. But the more Sarah learned, the more complicated her feelings became. Yes, Dorothy had been unfairly punished, but Linda had also been an 18-year-old girl, scared and pregnant, feeling pressured by everyone around her. Maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe she'd misunderstood Dorothy's intentions, but she'd also been protecting herself the only way she knew how. One evening, sitting on Dorothy's porch, Sarah finally asked the question that had been haunting her. Do you forgive her? For leaving? For keeping me from you? For all these years? Dorothy was quiet for a long time. I forgave her a long time ago. What choice did I have? Holding on to anger wouldn't bring her back. Wouldn't give me those years with her, or with you. All it would do is poison whatever life I had left. She looked at Sarah with tears in her eyes. But forgiveness doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I forgave her, but I still missed her every single day. I wish she'd told me about you, Sarah said. I wish I'd known you while she was still alive. You could have reconciled. Maybe, Dorothy said. Or maybe she couldn't face me. Couldn't admit she'd been wrong to stay away so long. Sometimes pride keeps us trapped longer than anger does. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Dorothy something she'd found while going through her mother's box of letters. Dozens of letters all addressed to Dorothy at the Maple Road address, all stamped and ready to mail, but none of them had ever been sent. Dorothy read them with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face, letters spanning years. Letters saying, "I'm sorry." Letters describing Sarah's childhood. Letters full of regret and love and longing. Linda had written to her mother hundreds of times over 30 years. She just hadn't been able to make herself mail them. She wanted to come back. Dorothy sobbed. She wanted to, but she couldn't figure out how. She was ashamed, Sarah said softly, understanding her mother better now than she ever had while she was alive. She'd made such a dramatic exit, burned the bridge so completely. How do you come back from that? How do you admit you were wrong after 30 years? The last letter was dated just weeks before Linda's diagnosis. "Dear Mom," it read, "I'm going to call you tomorrow. I've been saying that for 30 years, but this time I mean it. Sarah's getting married next year. She should know her grandmother. I should know my mother again. I'm so sorry for all the time I wasted being too proud to admit I was wrong. I love you. I've always loved you. Tomorrow, I promise. Love, Linda." But tomorrow never came. Linda got her diagnosis instead, and apparently, facing death, she still couldn't make that call. The shame was too deep. The years were too many. The bridge was too burned. "She loved you," Sarah told Dorothy. "She never stopped loving you. She just didn't know how to come back." Dorothy held the letters to her chest. I'd have welcomed her back in a heartbeat. Anytime. Any day. All she had to do was knock on my door. "I know," Sarah said. "I wish she'd known that too." They sat in silence for a while, grieving together for all the lost time, all the missed moments, all the years that could have been different if pride and shame hadn't gotten in the way. Finally, Dorothy spoke. "Your mother made a choice when she was 18 years old. A choice born from fear and hurt and feeling cornered. And then she spent the rest of her life trapped by that choice. Too proud or too ashamed to admit she might have overreacted. Too scared that I might not forgive her. We both lost 30 years because neither of us was brave enough to reach out. Because she thought I wouldn't want her back, and I thought she didn't want me. It's not fair," Sarah said. "No," Dorothy agreed. "It's not, but staying angry about it won't change it. All we can do is make sure we don't waste any more time." Sarah moved slowly at first, testing the waters of this new relationship, but Dorothy was patient, never pushing, always welcoming. Gradually, Sarah started visiting more often, 10 weekly, then several times a week. She learned that Dorothy was funny, with a dry wit that reminded Sarah of her mother. She learned that Dorothy had spent 30 years volunteering at a women's shelter, helping young mothers, perhaps her way of processing her own grief. She learned that Dorothy had never remarried after Sarah's grandfather died, had never had other children, had spent 3 decades essentially alone because the daughter she loved had disappeared. 6 months after their first meeting, Sarah invited Dorothy to Thanksgiving dinner. It was just the two of them in Sarah's small apartment, but it felt like the family gathering Sarah had always longed for. They looked at old photographs, Dorothy's from Linda's childhood, Sarah's from her own. They cried and laughed and told stories. They built a bridge across 30 years of silence. "I wish Mom was here," Sarah said at one point. "Me too," Dorothy said. But you're here. And maybe that is her gift to both of us, bringing us together even though she could undo it herself. Today, 2 years after finding that photograph, Sarah visits Dorothy every Sunday. They have dinner together, talk about their weeks, share their lives. Sarah has learned more about her mother in these 2 years than she learned in 32 years of living with her. Not because Dorothy badmouths her or reveals dark secrets, but because Dorothy shares memories that help Sarah understand where Linda came from, what shaped her, why she made the choices she made. Sarah has also learned about forgiveness real, complicated forgiveness. Dorothy forgave Linda not by pretending the abandonment didn't hurt, but by acknowledging the hurt and choosing love anyway. By understanding that Linda had been young and scared and had made a choice she could figure out how to unmake. By accepting that sometimes people we love hurt us, not because they're cruel, but because they re-flawed and human and doing the best they can with the pain they re-carrying. And Sarah has had to forgive too for Mother for the lies, for keeping Dorothy away, for robbing Sarah of 30 years with her grandmother. It hasn't been easy. There are still moments when Sarah feels angry about all the lost time, but then she looks at Dorothy and sees how much time they still have, and she chooses gratitude over bitterness. On the anniversary of Linda's death, Sarah and Dorothy visit her grave together. They bring flowers and sit on the grass and tell Linda about their relationship, about the family she tried to keep separate, but somehow brought together in the end. "I forgive you," Sarah says to the headstone, "for keeping us apart, for the lies, for all of it. I understand now. You were trying to protect yourself, and you got trapped. I forgive you." Dorothy places her hand on the grave. "I forgave you a long time ago, sweetheart. I just wish you'd known that while you were still here." They sit in comfortable silence. 3 generations of women, 1 buried, 2 living, all finally understanding each other. Have you ever discovered that your family history was built on misunderstandings? Have you ever learned that years of separation could have been avoided if someone had just been brave enough to reach out? Sometimes the people we think are villains are just people who made mistakes. Sometimes the bridges we think are burned can still be rebuilt. Sometimes it's never too late, except when it is. Don't let pride or shame or fear steal years from you. Don't let misunderstandings become permanent separations. Reach out. Forgive. Build bridges while there's still time. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more stories about forgiveness, family, and finding each other again. Share in the comments, have you ever reconnected with family after years apart? Have you forgiven someone who hurt you long ago? Your story could inspire someone else to reach out before it's too late.